Spoiler warning. The following discussion will contain spoilers. We recommend checking out the movie first, then coming back to hang with us. But if you don't care about that, glad to have you here. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Real Review. My name is Kevin.
I'm John.
It's February, so that means all this month we will be celebrating the real season of love. The Real Season of Love is a celebration of romantic comedies and Valentine's Day must-watches. On today's episode, we'll be taking a look at Bridget Jones, The Edge of Reason. After finding love, Bridget Jones questions if she really has everything she'd ever dreamed of having. We've gone into sequel territory for these rom-coms. Did you ever think you'd be here?
Never thought I'd ever get to this point.
I didn't think so either, to be honest with you. So going into this film, right away, I'm reminded of another comedy series. It's kind of spoilery, but kind of not. So I want to talk about it just real quick. One of my favorite comedies ever is The Hangover. Bridget Jones, ironically, I feel like follows a very similar pattern to those movies, right? You have the first one, which is really good by most standards, if not a classic. The second one does exactly the same thing and thinks they can get away with it. And then the third one slightly changes it up just to say, all right, well, we did something a little different. Bridget Jones, in my opinion, absolutely no different. You enjoyed the last one, right? What did you give it? I think you gave it a B. Was that where you stood with the last one, I think?
I think so.
Okay, so did you have any expectation going into this? What were your thoughts?
I was nervous going into this one.
Oh, boy.
I feel like a lot of rom-coms, when they have a second one,
right,
it's more of just same crap, throwing a different thing here and there, but it's more of the same. It's almost rewatching the first one.
Right.
Again, but with a little bit of different plots thrown in here.
And that's what this one is. And I would argue this one does it way worse than the first movie. To the point where as soon as the movie starts, I knew something wasn't right. Right away, we see Bridget Jones skydiving from an airplane. As soon as this movie starts, she's literally jumping out of an airplane for some kind of crazy interview.
Go. Jump. Oh, for Christ's sakes, go!
And then she falls down face first into the mud filled with pigs. That was literally the beginning of this movie. As soon as that happened, I'm like, oh no, what have they done? And unfortunately, that tone carries throughout this whole movie. But before we get super negative, were there any things that you actually liked in this movie? Were there any positives?
I guess there was some comedic timing in it. Some things were kind of funny here and there.
You two have a genuinely gorgeous bottom.
Thank you. I'm actually with the Mexican ambassador, the head of Amnesty International, and the Undersecretary for Trade and Industry. And you're on speakerphone.
Right, and I could see that. I think the chemistry is still all great with all the leads, right? We have Renee Zellweger back as Bridget Jones. She's still charming. She's still, a great actress in my opinion. I think she really carries the role well.
Doesn't matter. It's not about looks. That's what I'm saying.
Colin Firth returning again as Mark Darcy.
I said, I love you.
I'm sorry, I missed that again.
I said, I love you, for God's sake.
He can't really show his emotions, but there's something about him. He's a good guy. And then we have Hugh Grant. I'm kind of surprised he's back in this movie. This is where it really starts to feel a little shoehorned in. Hugh Grant's back in a completely different job, too, ironically. Now suddenly he's the head of his own TV show, and he's a quote-unquote recovering sex addict.
Ever fancied doing it in the dark with a total stranger? No, all right then. Perhaps not a total stranger.
Back off, Cleaver, or I'll report you to a sexual harassment tribunal. I'm a serious journalist.
Is that your most serious skirt, Jones?
Oh. Do you like it?
I didn't expect that turn for him, but I think he still carries the role really well. Again, all three of them still have really great chemistry, which leads to the whole My whole favorite scene in this movie, once again, would be the fight scene between Colin Firth and Hugh Grant.
Would you step outside, please?
Oh, no, it's not possible. Darcy, do you have any idea what century we actually live in?
Are you going to step outside, or am I going to have to drag you?
Oh, you're going to have to drag me.
I think they steal the show once again when they're fighting in like a little fountain and they're going at each other.
You know what, mate? If you're so obsessed with Bridget Jones, why don't you just marry her? Because then she'd definitely shag me.
If anything in this movie, I have to give it to them again, bringing back that. So I don't want to play down. Renee Zellweger does a really good job. They all do, though. They all bring their material for what they're given, which isn't really much. The whole idea of this movie, I think, is kind of unique for a follow-up to a romantic comedy. It's the concept of what happens after a happy ending, right? So at the end of the last movie, Bridget and Mr. Darcy, they got together. It was supposed to be all happy endings, you know. So it's like a typical rom-com, right? Everyone's happy. They lived happily ever after. Do they, though? Like, what happens after that movie? And I feel like Edge of Reason was trying to go that route.
So now I'm ridiculous.
Well, yes, tonight you were a little.
Well, tonight you were an arrogant ass. I think I may have made a terrible mistake inviting you and your folding underpants into my life. Good night.
But ultimately, I think it falls flat on its face, like Bridget Jones and the mud with the pigs, essentially. It's the same thing. They just don't know what to do, so we get a bunch of... Well, this is where we go into the negatives, ladies and gentlemen. We're already there, in case you were wondering. I feel like we just have random, outlandish scenarios throughout this whole movie.
That's the one thing about these kind of movies, too. They try so much to capitalize off of the first one.
Right.
That they do a disservice to the first one by making this one.
Yeah, and I mean, people always make the argument where, oh, this one ruined the first movie. It doesn't ruin the first movie. The first movie's still good, but it hurts maybe the legacy of a series of characters. I wouldn't say it ruins a movie necessarily, but it hurts those characters. I hate to say it, like I made the comparison earlier with The Hangover. They just did the same thing again. And all this movie feels like is we have to put Bridget, we have to make her single again. We have to tell this story all over again.
Weight, 4,000 pounds. I'm enjoying a relationship with 2 men simultaneously. The first called Ben, the other Jerry. Number of current boyfriends, 0. Number of calls from ex-boyfriend.
You have absolutely no messages. Not a single one. Not even from your mother.
I didn't know what to do, right? That's essentially what it felt like. We had no idea where to go with the story, so we're just going to break them up. It's forced, for sure.
Do you want to marry me?
Look,
You see, you can never muster the strength to fight for me.
I think they're trying to achieve maybe the whole what happens after the happy ending, but at the same time, I didn't feel that at all. This felt just like scenario after scenario, forced situation after forced situation. They go skiing. She literally goes into a race out of nowhere. She's going down the mountain. She loses control and she goes into a race. It's offensive for a lot of reasons. Is the whole Taiwanese jail scene.
5, 6, 7, 8, and 1.
That was absolutely the worst part of this entire movie for me. I didn't know what to say when that happened.
Boyfriend, he say he loved me, but he do no work and made me work 24 hours a day. Then he made me take a Halloween drug. What about you, Bishi? Well, you're bad boyfriend too.
Well, he really didn't stick up for me at this lawyer's supper. And then he would fold his...
It was so unneeded in it, and so, like, thrown in there.
I feel like they had a bunch of stories written on the table of like scenarios that Bridget could get herself into. They took like the best of the worst and said, all right, well, we're going to make a movie about it. But all we know is we know the beginning, we have to break them up. Mr. Darcy and Bridget have to be separated, right? They knew that for a fact. They had to break them up. And then by the end, they have to be back together. And that's what this movie felt like. I felt like there was no cohesive story. Bridget is still likable, I think, because of Renee Zellweger's performance. But overall, a lot of it was kind of offensive to even her character.
Unit 2, give me a close-up of the porker.
They really played up the whole fatty fall down joke. Like, that was really this movie. I always make fun of like Kevin James movies because it's always like, oh, fatty fall down, ha ha ha, let's all laugh at his face.
Here I am.
I think you're completely off your face. Hey!
They kind of did that with Bridget, which I think she lost a lot of her dignity in this movie. They put her in just really bad situations which were uncalled for.
Thank you very much. That was lovely. Really lovely. But I'm afraid it's still men in general, and Mark Darcy in particular, that I loved. Thanks. If I ever do decide to, back to the other side, oh, there's no one else. Only you.
I feel like overall this movie's just like, it's got like a dumb vibe to it too.
It's a stupid comedy. Right.
Like,
the tone's different. The first one was grounded, realistic expectations about relationships and, how we deal with them. This movie, it didn't, we're not doing that. We're just going to be an outlandish comedy out of nowhere.
It is a magic mushroom omelette, isn't it? Well, that's awful. There is nothing funny in this at all. Although, thank God, the mushrooms don't actually seem to be working.
well, yeah, and also I feel like the character in the first one, Bridget, was more relatable in that one than she is in this one.
Right.
Like, people can relate more to her character than the things that she gets into now are kind of like outlandish.
Right, and they do try here and there. Like I said, they bring up the whole pregnancy thing with her and Mr. Darcy, where she might be pregnant, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of intriguing. I do like that character development, like what would happen, how would they feel, and you expect him to go one way, being negative, but he's actually crazy positive about it.
You're not?
I might be. What if I were?
Well, I suppose to be quite frank, it'd be bloody fantastic. I mean, a little ahead of schedule. You really pregnant?
Well, give it 3 minutes.
And like that's more interesting kind of things. The series, when its roots are grounded, is very good. Like, it knows what it's doing, it understands its characters. But for whatever reason, they said we have to go over the top, we have to go bigger is better. As soon as they started going into that, as soon as they went the whole Taiwanese subplot area, this movie absolutely lost me. And the fact that they have to force Mr. Darcy and Bridget back together, the fact that he has to bail her out of a Taiwanese jail for drug smuggling.
Mark?
You all right?
Oh, fine. And scared shitless, but, perky.
And accidental drug smuggling, I guess I should say. I should preface that.
It's not mine.
These yours?
Yes. I mean, they're not my favorite pair or anything.
What are you doing, movie? Like, there was no other way to get these characters back together. You had to tell that whole cliche breakup, get back together story. I don't think that was the right story to tell for Bridget Jones. But I think the last thing, and maybe the most over-offensive thing, in my opinion, the romance just isn't there. The last one, as a man, I could see that being romantic, the whole ending of that movie, them getting together in the snow and him just like, we're going to start anew. Again, I think it all boils down to, it just felt very grounded and very real to life. This movie just, again, he bails her out of jail, and then she runs to his law office where he's with all his partners, and she goes in front of them, and they go back and forth.
In fact, there's a question I've been meaning to ask you.
All right. As long as it's not, will you marry me? Oh, God. It is, will you marry me?
Well, I'm not going to say it now. You spoiled the moment.
Is it, will you marry me?
Bridget, the moment's gone.
No, wait. Wait.
He finally proposes to her.
Bridget Jones, will you marry me?
It just didn't do it for me at all. This movie didn't have it. No amount of charm, no amount of anything could really get out of it. Again, I think the acting was sufficient for what they were given. It's one of those situations where I find myself on the side of the actors. I don't want them to get the crap for this movie. It wasn't their fault. They were just acting. They were doing their best with what they were given. They all worked together. Just the story just can't support such strong actors. That's what it comes down to. I think we're at that point, actually, where we're going to give our final scores. I'm going to give Bridget Jones, Edge of Reason, a D+.
No more small talk.
Bloody know-it-all.
It did try in some extent, but it wasn't enough. They just wanted to bank on us knowing the first movie, putting these characters in the same situation all over again, and forcing you guys to watch it. John, where do you stand with this film?
I give this movie a D.
I wouldn't share a lift with, let alone a job.
Oh, come on, Jones. There must have been something you liked about me.
I definitely skip it.
It's a
I don't
shame.
know how, it's just not a movie that I felt like gave you enough to have to actually go out and watch
It's
it.
a shame where I think we see this a lot in comedies where they bank on the characters, right? And again, I use the expression over again, just using The Hangover as an example. They knew you loved the characters, so we're just going to do the same thing all over again. That's what you want, right? Ironically, that's not what people want. And I don't know why Hollywood keeps making that mistake with movies, especially with comedies, where they think by just doing the same thing all over again, people are going to be happy with that, because ultimately they're not. And then if there ends up being a third movie, it always ends up being different from the last one. So I don't know, maybe someday they'll learn. So John, where can the people find us at home?
You can find us over on YouTube. Go over there, The Real Movie Guys on YouTube. Go over, follow our channel, like it, subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, at The Real Movie Guy on Twitter. Interact with us over there. Let us know about this movie and other movies that you like to watch in the season of love. You could also find us now over on Instagram. You can follow us over there. Go like us on Instagram. You can also listen to us on many podcasting platforms such as...
Yes, for your listening pleasure, we are also available in podcast form at iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Overcast, Breaker, Radio Public, and Pocket Casts. Be sure to give us a listen at any of those fine places. If you already are right now, hey, we greatly appreciate it. Just search out Real Movie Guys. We should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin. That guy over there, he's John. We are your Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Don't forget, love is in the air as the real season of love continues. We'll catch you next time.
See ya!